I met a real werewolf in the forest, true horror experience. I'm sure you've heard the stories. People disappearing into the forest, strange howls in the night, sightings of creatures that shouldn't exist. I used to think they were just tales. That was until I met one, face to face, in the dead of night. A real werewolf. And I'll never forget it. What do you think? Do you believe in werewolves? Have you ever encountered something you couldn't explain? Leave your thoughts and creepy experiences in the comments. Or let me know what stories you want to hear next. It started as an innocent camping trip with some friends. We'd all been planning it for weeks. An escape from the city, a chance to relax and reconnect with nature. We decided on a secluded spot deep in the forest, away from the hustle and bustle of everyday life. It seemed perfect, the kind of place where the air was fresh. The trees towered above you, and the only sound you heard was the rustling of the leaves in the wind. We got there early in the afternoon, and by the time the sun was dipping below the horizon, we had set up our tents, built a fire, and were starting to get comfortable. The forest around us was dense and dark, with thick trees and underbrush that made it hard to see very far ahead. But that didn't bother us. We were having fun, joking around, telling stories, and enjoying the peace that only a remote location like this could offer. But as night fell, something started to feel off. At first, it was nothing big, just a sense of unease creeping in the back of my mind. The fire crackled and popped, casting flickering shadows on the trees around us. The air was colder than it should have been, even for a late autumn night. We joked about it, shrugged it off, and kept the conversation light. But the further into the night we went, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. I excused myself to go to the bathroom and wandered a little too far from the campsite. As I made my way through the woods, I could hear the sounds of animals in the distance. Crickets, the occasional owl, the rustle of small creatures moving through the leaves. But then, I heard something different, a low growl. It was soft at first, barely audible, like a whisper carried on the wind. But as I stood there, frozen, trying to understand what I was hearing, it came again, louder this time. My heart skipped a beat. I was no expert on animal sounds, but this growl felt different. It was deep, guttural, and far too menacing. I turned around and began to head back to the camp. But as I walked, the growl followed, growing louder and more pronounced. My steps quickened, my breath coming in shallow gasps. I couldn't see anything in the darkness, but I could feel something moving through the trees, something huge, something fast. My mind raced with possibilities. Bears, wolves, but it didn't sound like either of those. Then I heard it, the unmistakable sound of twigs snapping, followed by the heavy thud of footsteps. Too heavy to be a deer, too deliberate to be a bear. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I wasn't alone, and whatever it was getting closer. I broke into a run, my feet pounding against the uneven ground as I pushed myself to go faster. I didn't dare look back, afraid of what I might see in the shadows. But as I neared the campsite, I slowed down, hoping the sound of my steps would drown out whatever was following me. When I finally burst into the clearing where our campfire was, I was panting, breathless, and trembling. My friends looked up, startled by my sudden entrance. I tried to laugh it off, brushing away the terror I had felt, but the panic in my eyes must have told them otherwise. They asked me what was wrong, and I told them I heard something in the woods, something big, but I didn't know what. They laughed, said it was probably a bear or a coyote, and I tried to convince myself that they were right. But that night, sleep didn't come easy. I lay awake in my tent, the sounds of the forest swirling around me. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves, sent a wave of dread through me. And then I heard it again, the growl. This time, it was much closer. I sat up, my heart racing. I tried to tell myself it was just an animal, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. The growl was too distinct, too powerful. It wasn't the sound of any animal I had ever heard. Suddenly, there was a loud crash from outside the tent, something heavy crashing into the trees. I could hear branches snapping, followed by a roar, a bone-chilling sound that made my blood run cold. It was like nothing I had ever heard before. It wasn't an animal. It was something else. Something much, much worse. The growling continued, now accompanied by the sound of heavy footsteps moving around the campsite. It was as if whatever was out there was circling us, studying us, waiting. I could hear it getting closer, the growls growing louder, and my body froze in fear. I didn't know what to do. My friends were asleep, unaware of the terror lurking just outside our tents. I grabbed my flashlight and slowly unzipped the tent, peering outside. The fire had died down to embers, and in the dim light, I could barely make out the shapes of the trees around us. But then I saw something, a pair of glowing eyes peering at me from behind a tree. I couldn't breathe. The eyes were yellow, intense, and seemed to pierce through the darkness. They were far too high off the ground to be any normal animal, and they were watching me. I felt a chill run down my spine. I wanted to scream, but my throat was dry, my voice trapped in fear. The creature stepped out of the shadows, and for the first time, I saw it. It was massive, bigger than any wolf or bear I had ever seen. It stood on two legs, hunched over like a man, but covered in fur. Its arms were long, its claws sharp and glistening in the dim light. Its head was wolf-like, with a snout full of sharp teeth that looked like they could tear through bone. And those eyes, those glowing yellow eyes, they were filled with malice, with hunger. I couldn't move. I was frozen in place, staring at this creature, unsure if it was real or if I was losing my mind. The growls were now louder, more aggressive, as if it was trying to intimidate me, to get me to make a move. I held my breath, praying it wouldn't notice my friends still sleeping in their tents. The werewolf, because that's what it was, I had no doubt, sniffed the air, its head turning toward the sound of my friends breathing. I knew it could smell them. I knew it was going to attack. Without thinking, I scrambled to my feet, grabbed the nearest stick, and ran out into the clearing, waving it in front of the creature. I didn't know what else to do. I wasn't going to just stand there and wait to be eaten. The creature hissed at me, its yellow eyes flashing with anger. It lunged forward, its claws reaching for me, and I barely dodged in time. My heart was pounding in my chest as I backed away, desperately trying to make it back to the tent. I couldn't let it get to my friends. I had to protect them. My body moved on autopilot as I grabbed my backpack and shook my friends awake, telling them to get up, to run. They were groggy, confused, until they heard the growl, the unmistakable sound of something hunting us. We didn't have much time. We ran, sprinting through the forest, not knowing where we were going or how to escape. I kept looking behind me, half expecting to see the creature chasing us, but I never saw it again. It was like it had vanished into the night, disappearing as quickly as it had come. We didn't stop running until we were miles away from the campsite, too terrified to go back. We found a small cabin by the side of the road and begged the owners to let us in. They didn't believe us at first, thinking we were just scared kids who had wandered off the trail. But when we told them what we'd seen, they went pale. That was the last time I went into that forest, and I haven't spoken to my friends about it since. We all agreed not to tell anyone about what happened that night, too afraid that no one would believe us. But I know what I saw, and I'll never forget the eyes of that creature, the real werewolf that hunted us in the forest. What do you think? Have you ever encountered something like this, or maybe something you couldn't explain? Let me know in the comments below, and share your own creepy stories. If you want to hear more, tell me what you'd like next.